All right, today I'm gonna go through the sleeper system that I built for my 4Runner. I'm gonna show you how to build it yourself and then kind of go through, give a tour of my setup and my gear and talk about what I do and don't like about it. So let's get started. First off, this is a 2023 SR5 4Runner. So it's 5th gen, and therefore the dimensions that I give you should work if you have a 5th gen. You need to double check though, because measure twice, cut once. Second thing I want to get out of the way is this is based on a design by Carver. I did reach out to him. He has a video of a similar setup. I followed a lot of his instructions, and I want to give credit where credit's due, but I do have some major modifications from that build that suit me better. So I figured that I'd make my own video. Nick's a cool guy. He said, no problem. I'll sprinkle in some tips that he gave along the way. Here we go. So the first major deviation from Nick's design is he put this platform and it goes all the way across. So it fills up the entire back of the 4Runner. I didn't really want to do that because I like having this space on the side, and I go out solo a lot for overnights, 2 nights, that sort of thing. And I wanted to be able to have a sleep system on this side, but have this side clear. So the reason for that, the main reason anyway, was I wanted to have this seat. So I have this platform that I'll talk about in a little while that I can just take out. And with that taken out, I have a back seat. Now, having that back seat for me was important because I do a lot of canyoneering and stuff, and we'll go out as a group and we'll have to car shuttle all the time. So you want to have as many seats available as possible so that you can do all that shuttling. However, there's a problem, and that's the way the seats fold. So here's the issue. This isn't flat, and this sticks up. So you can see the edge of this is past this. So if I don't take the seat out on the other side, I can't get as much length on this bed. So you really got 3 options. You raise the platform so that it goes over the top of the folded down back seats. You remove the back seats, or you cut the platform short so that it stops where it hits the back seats when they're folded up. Each one has its pluses and minuses. I mean, removing the back seat, you don't have that flexibility to adjust for like a car shuttle like I was talking about. If you cut it short, you have a shorter sleeping platform. So if you're tall, that could be a problem. And if you raise it up, you're getting close to the top of the 4Runner and it starts feeling a little more claustrophobic. I wanted the most headroom, and I also wanted the flexibility. That's why I did it in quarters, so I could have a single or a double for the full width. So one quick side note, I did want this in 2 sides, so you could have single sleeper or double. But I started thinking about it, and I figured maybe get more flexibility by cutting it into the 4 pieces. That way you can do several different configurations. You can have a platform in the back with the entire back seat, so you have additional storage there. You can have the single sleeper. You can have the back seat available on the driver's side with single sleeper and a platform, or you can have the double sleeper. So a lot of different options with this build. But you can use any combination that works best for your kit. Now, what I did find, taking out that back seat, there is a ton of space to store stuff back there. And it goes way over and way back. Initially, I didn't want to remove the seats, but it's not really that hard to do. And with that added space that you can store things, I actually really like it. It works great. And finally, I built this thing, which is basically a leveling platform for the back seat, because when the back seat's down, it's not flat. And you just put that in like that. Gives you a nice flat surface you can put things on, and really good for getting into the bed. All right, let's get into the build itself. First off, there's a lot of materials, a lot of tools that are involved. I'm gonna try and cover them in the video, but just in case, I will put them down in the description as well. If I can figure out a way to get the dimensions of everything that I'll put up on the screen in the video, if I can put them so you can download them, I will. If I can't figure that out because I'm not super tech savvy, then you can screenshot what's on here so that you have those dimensions and blueprints to build from. So let's get going. First thing you're gonna need is 3/4 inch plywood. Now, 3/4 inch plywood may be overkill, depends kind of on how much you weigh and how much weight you're gonna put on here. I like to overbuild because it's gonna take a lot of abuse. So started with 3/4 inch plywood. Now you need to cut this into 4 pieces. And here are the dimensions of the pieces. Problem is, if you were to put this to scale onto a 4x8 piece of plywood, you're gonna quickly learn that it doesn't fit. I mean, maybe somebody out there is better at geometry than I am, but I couldn't figure out how to get it to work off a sheet of plywood. It's not like I just started cutting and didn't think about it, but anyway, it doesn't come out of a 4x8 sheet. So you got a couple of options here. You can cut the 3 main pieces out, being the 2 on the rider side and then the 1 on the very far rear on the driver's side. Then you can buy a piece. They sell smaller pieces that are pre-cut at Home Depot and Lowe's. Or you can do what I did, which I just took that and cut a couple of smaller pieces out of what was remaining out of the 4x8 sheet after I got the other 3 pieces cut, and then splice that and put some trim boards on it. So the next thing you're gonna see, and it's a theme throughout this build, is I would make a cut and then I would check the fit. I highly recommend as you go to take the pieces each step of the way and make sure that you've cut them properly. Nothing worse than making a mistake and not finding it out until 5 steps down the road. Not that I made any mistakes. Everything went perfectly on my build. So after you have the 4 pieces cut and you've checked for fit, then you need to take the 2 rear pieces and measure 4 inches and 10 inches, draw a line directly between the 2 and cut the corners off. The reason you do that is the 4Runner, the back of it is slightly rounded and you can't really get fit tight against the rear hatch if you don't cut this out. So once you get the 4 pieces of plywood cut, I then use some 1x4 trim wood and just kind of laid out the pieces like you see on this diagram. You don't have to follow this exact pattern. This really isn't about reinforcing the 3/4 inch plywood. It's more about just giving a little more meat for where you want to put the legs so that it can attach to them and just have a little bit of reinforcement, except for the piece that's spliced. So I went through, laid them out like this, put 2 screws in each one to hold them into place just so they were there for fit, make sure that I had the cuts right. But I didn't want to put a bunch of screws in there because I'm going to take those off later. You'll see that in the build. Cut all your trim boards to fit, and then you move on to the legs. For the legs, I used 1-inch Steeltek structural piping. This is not like water piping. It's not for fluids. It is for structures like this. Like you want to build a jungle gym or something, you would want to use structural piping. So use the 1-inch Steeltek piping. You can only find that at Lowe's. And when I went there, they didn't even know what I was talking about. I had to go through the whole store and find it myself. But they did have it, and they also sell these brackets and other accessories that you can use. I didn't know exactly how these legs were gonna lay out, so I bought some of the round brackets that have 4 holes, and I bought some of the oval ones that have 2. The reason being, the oval ones, obviously, you can push tighter up against the edge of the platform and the outside of the 4Runner. And again, wasn't sure exactly how they'd lay out, so I think I bought 8 of each and laid them out like shown on these graphics. Now you want to cut the legs to length. I followed Nick's lead with the 12 inches for the back legs. The back is easy because the back of the 4Runner, that bed, that is flat, so keeping them 12 inches is really easy and consistent. Now, I do want to note that Nick had mentioned to me that he lowered his since the initial build. He just felt like there wasn't enough headroom where you had it up at 12 inches off of the bed of the truck. Personally, it doesn't really bother me that much, probably because I have the single wide where I have more room to move around if I just get off to the side of it as opposed to a platform along the entirety of the back of the truck. But that's really up to you. You know, you want to make them taller, you want to make them shorter. You just add or deduct links onto the heights that I tell you here. Like I said, it is fairly easy to cut the legs in the back because it's uniform. On the front, where you get into like the footwells of the back seats, it's not as easy. It's very uneven and it's really difficult to get the right height. So I don't have them perfectly dialed into where I love them. If anybody out there can think of a good way to pre-measure this to get a precise fit once you have the brackets on your platform, put it in the comments and look down there and see if there's a better way to do it. I kind of went trial and error Tried to use a level, hold the platform with one hand, measure with the other one, and I got close enough to where it works for me, but don't hold me to these dimensions. It could use a little bit of tweaking for sure. When you get done with these things, you want to put these 1-inch rubber, I think they're furniture feet, basically to keep from scuffing like the floor with like the legs of your chair, that sort of thing. But you put these on there, and if you're too short on some of the legs, you can put a 1-inch wooden dowel and cut that off. And I definitely had to do that on some of these dimensions. I don't know, I thought about maybe later after I'd built it, if I bought a few of these 1-inch dowels and cut those to length and then adjusted them, got them perfect, and then used those lengths to go back and cut the pipes. But yeah, just a note of warning, there is a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done there. Anyway, when it comes to cutting the pipes, I have one of those copper pipe cutters. Copper is a very soft metal. In Nick's video, he says he used that to cut these structural steel pipes. And I tried it once, and they kind of, you spin the thing around the pipe and it scores it, and then you screw it down and it scores it deeper and deeper and deeper and eventually cuts it off. Mine just kind of spun in a corkscrew going up the pipe. I tried that for about 5 minutes, said, I have, God, how many of these? 16 of these legs to cut. I'm not gonna do that with this thing, it'll take me forever. I went and got a blade for my chop saw that would go through metal and used the chop saw. Worked great, saved me a ton of time, didn't cost that much, but it does make these really sharp edges that you need to grind down. I have a Dremel tool, I just got a bit on that and just would go around each of these cuts and smooth it out so you don't have this razor sharp slag off the edge of your pipe. Now when it comes to laying out the brackets, this is how I put mine on. You may want to test it, you know, depending on whether or not you have one of those slide out beds or trays or something like that. The brackets from Steeltek have very big holes. They're like a 1/4 inch. And the screws that I was using are pretty small. So I didn't feel confident to get a 1/4 inch screw going into a 1x4 trim board and then into a 3/4 inch piece of plywood and get enough bite to be strong enough to hold up to going out and camping and driving on these 4-wheel drive roads. So what I went with was 1/4 inch through bolts. Now I wanted to make sure that the brackets and the legs were all in the right place before I started drilling through the through bolts. So what I did was I would take a screw and a big washer, screw them into place, put the pipes in, check to make sure that everything worked in my 4Runner, take them back out, and then mark where they should go on the trim boards. You don't have to do that because I have all the dimensions in here, but again, it doesn't hurt to double check this because not everybody's 4Runner is exactly the same. I don't know what accessories you have. So you may want to try that if you've just got a stock SR5 5th edition, you can go with the dimensions that I have. Anyway, once you've got everything cut and ready to fit, then I went with this indoor-outdoor carpeting. Now they sell this at Home Depot, they sell it at Lowe's. This is the kind that I used. It works really well. It's dark color, so it hides stains and everything, and it is made to be able to get wet and to be stain resistant, and it's really cheap. So once you get that, I'm gonna take all your trim boards, basically take everything apart, put the carpet on. Now, a couple of tips on putting the carpet on, because I screwed this up. It seems very straightforward, but make sure you know what side is up. You have these 4 boards and it's really easy to get them twisted around. Slow down, think about it. The last thing you want to do is staple this carpet onto your plywood and then realize you stapled it on the wrong side and you got to take it off. Probably throw it away if you put it on the ones that are cut and start over. So make sure that it's on the right side. And the other thing, just to be neat, is it is directional carpet. Lay the plywood out and make sure that you're putting it on so that it's all running the same direction. You don't have to, but I like it to look neat, so that's what I did. Once you have the carpet fit and stapled on, take all of your bracing boards that you cut to fit, put them on each piece, screw them into place. I put one about every 3 or 4 inches and just made sure that it was tightly attached. And then it's time to move on to the brackets for the legs. Now you've already got these laid out, so now it's time to take drill bit and drill all the way through, including through the carpet. Now the through bolting may be a little bit of overkill, but again, I like to overbuild. It's gonna take a lot of abuse. 3/4 inch plywood, 1 inch trim board is not gonna get you a really strong bite, especially with a 1/4 inch diameter hole. So I preferred the through bolts with the oversized washers. You want the bolts with the rounded heads so you don't have something sharp that you can scrape yourself up on, but through bolting is the way to go in my opinion. So once you get the brace boards and the brackets attached, put the legs on, the structural steel pipe, add the rubber feet to the legs and put it in and test the fit. This is where I found that it was uneven and a little bit unlevel on the front 2 pieces, and I had to cut the dowels to get it to the right length and just kind of tweak it and adjust it some. That's the trickiest part of the entire build. But if you start with the dimensions that I show for the length of the legs here, you should get pretty close. Keep in mind, if you don't put the brackets in the legs exactly where I show them on these graphics, that dimension, that height of those front legs and the back legs on the front 2 pieces, that could all change. So I think I mentioned this before at the beginning, but you have to take the back seats out in order to put the front 2 pieces of the platform in. I typically go with just the rider side 2 platforms for a single wide sleeper. The reason I do that is the rider side rear seat is wider. The one directly behind the driver is like, I think it's under 20 inches for the platform. So it's really tight, wouldn't be comfortable. It works fine when you have both of them in place and the entire back of your 4Runner is a platform. But I started with the rider side, take the seat out. If you don't know how to do that, I was very reluctant to do that, but it's really easy. You can look up how-tos on YouTube and find out, I think there's 5 bolts that you have to remove for each of them. Very straightforward. At this point, it is just removing the seats, making sure everything's fitted up while everything's tightened up, little tweaks here and there with the legs, and should be fitted up. Once you've got all this done, put all 4 platforms into the back of your 4Runner, and it's time to figure out how to tie them down. I use some turnbuckles, quick links, and carabiners, and D-rings, and then you want to take the tie downs in the cargo bed and use the turnbuckles to attach D-rings that are screwed onto the bottom of the platform, and you can tighten those down that it kind of pulls the platform down and holds it into place. I feel like the easiest way to figure out where you want to put the D-rings is go to each of the cargo tie down points. Put your turnbuckle on it and then just kind of feel, okay, where does this D-ring want to go underneath? And then I just took painter's tape, marked that, did that for all the locations, and then just took the platforms out, screwed the D-rings on, there you go. Now here's a step you don't need to do, but I just thought it made it look nicer. I then took all the platforms out and took black paint and painted all of the exposed plywood and 1x4s. It looks better. It would be nice if you could do it before you had the carpet on. That made it kind of a slow process, but I just think it's a nice touch. Now a little pro tip here for storage, because I don't have all 4 of the pieces in. I generally just leave the single sleeper on the rider side in there. So I've got the other 2 pieces that I hang up on the wall in my garage. You don't want the legs protruding, but you also don't want to guess what legs go into which bracket. So I numbered inside the brackets on the plywood, and then I put some painter's tape onto the legs and put the numbers on the legs. So that way I know exactly which legs go into which hole, and I can hang those things and store them when I'm not using them. When I went out with the single sleeper, I had the 2 separate platforms, and they kind of wanted to shift independently of each other. So I went back to Home Depot, I bought another one of those turnbuckles and got a piece, I don't even know what it's called, you can see it in the video, that is made for like a gate, latch, that kind of thing. And then use that to take the 2 platforms and tighten them so that they held together. Now I haven't had the entire sleep system where I've used all 4 pieces out in the field, but I'm sure I'm gonna have to get something similar to hold those together and possibly hold the 2 sides of the sleep system together as well. Finally, we get to the bedding. I had some 3-inch memory foam, like a mattress topper. I had that around, I tried it. It wasn't cushiony enough for me, so I went and I bought another 2-inch topper. So together I've got 2 layers, one 2-inch, one 3-inch. I couldn't find an air mattress and I couldn't find a just traditional, like a futon mattress or something like that, that was the right dimension for both sides. So I went with the memory foam. That's really up to you, what you find comfortable. If you're young and don't get sore when you sleep on the ground, you might be fine with 3 inches of this or 2 inches of foam. Me, I'm old, so I've got 5 and I still feel like it could be a little bit thicker. If you get the memory foam, just cut it to the dimensions that will fit onto the platforms. Just follow the same dimensions as the plywood, maybe undersize it by just a ½ inch or an inch. And make sure that you think twice. This is where I screwed up, where you've got to do that 10-inch and 4-inch and cut that triangle off of the edge. Yeah, I put the 10-inch leg where the 4-inch leg was supposed to be and vice versa and had the angle wrong. By that point, I was like, I'm ready to be done with this. Don't make that mistake. Cut it at the right point, yeah. Last thing I did was I got some flat sheets for twin size bed, and I got the second cheapest sewing machine off of Amazon. I'm not a sewer. I don't even think that's the right term. I think seamstress. I can't sew stuff. I've never done it before. It was not fun, but it did do the job. Took the sheets, folded them in half, sewed it together, sewed the bottom, left one end open like a gargantuan pillowcase. It's too long on the end. I had these grand visions of putting Velcro and making it nice and tight. Hey, if sewing's your thing, I don't need to tell you. If sewing is not your thing, struggle through it like I did. It's good to go. So the last thing I did was make that leveling platform for the back seat. I didn't have any plywood left over, so I went back to Home Depot and got composite board. That's a bad idea. You can see here that it's got a crack down the center. I had to reinforce it. It doesn't support that weight like plywood, so definitely go with plywood on this. Just took that, got a jigsaw, cut it to these dimensions, and I had leftover 1x4s, just stacked them up, screwed them together, wrapped it all in a carpet, and there you go, you got the platform. So that's pretty much it for the build. Let's move on to the tour of my setup. So one thing I have mixed feelings about are tables. I hate regular folding tables. You gotta kind of put them down first. They take up a ton of space. Everything that sits on them slides around. So I don't take them, but they're really nice to have. So one of my favorite things is this folding table that I found on Amazon. So it folds up really small. So it's just great to fit when you have limited space like you do if you're sleeping in a 4Runner. It's not super sturdy, but it works, it gets the job done. And it's just so much better than the folding tables I have been using. Another thing I got is this Tupperware container. Believe I got this at Home Depot. They sell them at Home Depot and Lowe's. And it just fits perfectly underneath the bed. Now, I have this thing, and this is packed with almost everything I need to go camping. So I have snacks in here, cook pot, fuel, lighter, first aid kit. I can't go through everything. There's a ton of stuff in here. But basically, if you get everything you need, put it into this size container, it'll fit in here. You need to go somewhere, you just grab it, slide it under the back seat, and you're good to go. So I found this to be super convenient. What I hate about it is I need to find something. Oh, there's my fire starter. It's just not, it's not super well organized. So when it comes to space, this is great, but when it comes to actually being able to use your gear, it's not perfect. Haven't really figured that one out yet, but this works for me, and just the convenience of being able to throw it in the car and go, that kind of makes up for the fact that I spend a lot of time at camp rummaging through this to try to find what I need. And one thing that I will go through that I have that you kind of need are these bug screens. You want to have the windows down so you can get some air through there a lot of times. And take these, put them over there like that, and no bugs. Now, come on, crow. Now these, between the gunfire and the crows and the airplanes, so this is just a no-name brand that I got off of Amazon. I'm sure you can make your own. I'm sure there are other brands, nothing special about it, but you do want some type of screening, because if you need to let that air through so you don't suffocate in the heat or something, you need to keep the bugs out. Used them last night, worked great. So I have a couple of coolers that I use. What I've been into lately is this Set Power FC15. So it's a 15, I forget if it's 1/4 liter but it's a smaller cooler, electric cooler. I love it. You know, it works great, doesn't take up much space, doesn't draw much power, and without the ice and everything, I find that it's more than adequate for me for a couple of days on a solo trip. So, got the electric cooler. Right now, I'm powering that off of this thing, which is the Titan from ArcPax. Now, right now, I'm reviewing this thing, so I'm testing it out. But its claim to fame is it's an extreme temperature power bank. So it's a 1200 watt power bank. I think you can store it up to like 160 some degrees. So I've just been leaving it in my truck. It's 115, 120 during the day out here in Arizona in July, and I don't have to worry about it. Any other battery pack, the heat just kills them, and so I store those in the house. This one I'm testing out, I'm leaving in the truck. You don't need to use that, but some type of a power bank is really nice if you're going to do this kind of camping. And the back seat on the rider's side, where the seat's removed, is a great place to put it. Now, the next thing I have in here is the rinse kit. This is the rinse kit cube. It's basically an electric shower. So I don't take the rinse kit on every trip. If I'm doing something like my wife and I just went to Colorado, we camped out for 4 or 5 nights, and we had this to take showers. Really nice, helps with your marriage if you do practice some type of hygiene. You don't need that kind of shower, but some kind of shower is nice to have if you're gonna go on longer trips. Shorter ones just stink, it doesn't matter. For gear, obviously some of it just gets thrown in here for when I'm driving. You'll see that I like these Tupperware containers. They're just really convenient. You take the gear that's specific for the trip you're on, and you just throw it in there, and you're good to go. And then the added plus is, if you need space in your car at night at camp, you just take this thing out, throw it on the ground, and you got space. So last but not least, the bedding. Now, I have a sleeping bag that I put in here. I don't even know what the rating is. It's a spare one that we had. You can use blankets, you know, whatever's comfortable. Which brings me to the pillow. This is a memory foam pillow that I got specifically for camping. Get a nice pillow. Treat yourself. You're worth it. Probably. I don't know you. So I said I would talk about some of the things that don't quite work. And one is this platform. I love it. It's great because it levels everything out. It's great for storing things, but stuff wants to slide right down there. The only way to prevent that from happening is to do that slow grocery turn, you know, when you've got a bunch of groceries in the back and you were lazy and you didn't stack them properly, and you're turning real slow and you're looking at the guy behind you like, I've got groceries, man, I'll get there, and they're honking and stuff. Yeah, a little bit of an edge around that to just catch things from sliding off would have been a much better design. The other thing that I have that's my main complaint is that even with the seat removed and this platform extended all the way from the back to the back of the front seat, my feet touch the window. I can't quite sleep comfortably. So I'm 5'10", if you're over that, it's just gonna be worse. You may wanna consider doing the full platform where you can kind of sleep sideways in there and get more length, because outside of pushing the front rider's side seat and all the way up to the front where it's totally uncomfortable for anybody to sit in it, I don't know another way to get more length out of it. So keep that in mind if you're 5'10" and above. It's doable, but I just wish I didn't have that problem. Yeah, everything else seems to be working fine. I like the setup. It's really convenient, and it's really all about customization. I mean, I've said this a couple of times, but this is the layout and the configuration that I tried that works for me. Yours may be a little bit different, but hopefully between Nick's design and mine, you can find a middle ground, or follow his, follow mine, doesn't matter, and get a system that works right for you. Hope you found this helpful, and I think we're done here.